Okay, this is a first brief introduction lecture to one of our readings. This is the introduction to really our first substantive reading from Plato's Republic, or the Republic of Plato. But I want to start by talking about the kind of book this is. This is a book of political philosophy, right? This class is called Ethics and Political Philosophy. Political philosophy is kind of an old school thing. It's not political science, right? Political philosophy is something very different. It's a foundational study. It's foundational to many things, to politics, to social thought, to understandings of government, to ethics. So political science is just like it pretends to be, right, a science. Political philosophy does not. It's philosophy. It's thinking about deeper forms, and it's certainly one of the oldest forms of humanistic inquiry, right? So even before people were doing history or literature, and people were writing literature, but literature wasn't a serious discipline in terms of something like a mode of inquiry. Political philosophy was kind of one of the first. And what does it do? What does it ask? It asks some pretty big questions. How should I live my life? What is happiness? What is the best way to live? What is the best way to govern? What is the best government? What is the most just form of government? And political philosophy is what we would call normative. It says there's a right answer. There's a right and a wrong answer. So this is not just like, oh, how should I live my life? I do my thing, you do your thing, it's all good. No, it says there's right answers and wrong answers. There's better ways to live one's life. There are ways to find true happiness, and there's a lot of ways that are false. So political philosophy is normative, right? It says there is a norm. This is the thing. This is what you need to do, and that other stuff is not right. So Plato's Republic is a book of political philosophy. It is very old. 380 BCE, and this is my opinion, but it's probably one of the, it's like a pretty big deal. I mean, the fact that we're still talking about this book is kind of a big deal, right? And the fact that if you read it, the whole thing, it's great. I mean, it's a really good, to imagine that a book that old is enjoyable and makes you think is kind of incredible, right? It really is kind of incredible. So we're going to read a little passage about it, about justice. Okay, so why read the Republic? Well, it's Athenian, and we know Athens, democracy, yay, good for them. But something we don't think about is Athens is really, really weird, like way weirder than you could ever imagine. It's not just like people walking around in togas, right? Like that's not why it's weird. We can hide behind our screens. We can run away from our emotions. We can drive around in cars. Like technology is so integrated into our lives that we can kind of turn away from a lot of stuff. We can turn away from suffering. We can turn away from emotion. We can turn away from just like what it feels like to walk a long way on a hot day. Like all of these things we don't have. Athenians have that. There's no extra things, right? It's just it's like bare life in a city. People are dying. There have been dead bodies on the streets. Sickness is everywhere. Plagues. It's interesting, right? That COVID-19 is nothing, right, to what you would have, many of these cities would have faced back in, the 5th century or something. Really, really diverse. People who speak not only just different languages, but languages that are unintelligible. All different kinds of ability, cognitive, physical, you name it. It would have been a really weird place, right? From our perspective, right? And why does that matter? Because the questions that they're asking are so much broader than the kind of questions we ask. We have a very narrow focus on what is possible. They had a very wide open focus. So, advance the slide here. Why not? Okay. So it gives us a glimpse at a pre-modern form of government. And this is, again, something we are not familiar with in the modern world, at least not in the West. This is a kind of government where the state or the nation is the same thing as the morals that people have, is the same thing as the religion people have, right? So morals, religion, and the state are all one. We don't really have that, right? Certainly, probably since about the 1500s on. This is why Machiavelli is considered one of the first modern philosophers. He's very interested in taking these things apart. We in the 21st century United States, certainly these are very different categories for the majority, right, of Americans. Indeed, for the government itself, right, with the separation of church and state and all that, not being able to legislate morality. There's all kinds of ways in which these things are separate. The question for the ancients then is, how do you take these three and make it just, right? How do you create a system of justice and just laws and rules when these things are fused together? Okay, so what is the form of the republic? It's a dialogue. Why is it a dialogue? Dialogues get you tripped up, right? They separate you from your biases. You'll be reading and you go, yeah. You picture that Jack Nicholson meme where he's like, yes, yes. And then suddenly, right, someone comes in, right, and turns things around, right? Plato comes in and says this, that, the other, and suddenly you realize, oh, you follow down a wrong path, and now you feel the wrongness. You feel how you were wrong. That's why dialogues are so interesting, right? Because they help to create the conditions of understanding, right? You can't tell someone, think this is what justice is, just believe it, or you're wrong. You have to walk people. This is why the Socratic method is so important, right? You have to walk people to their own conclusions. Okay, so what is the scene here? The actors in this little subset of we'll talk more about this in class, obviously, but I just want to set the scene a little bit so when you read it, you'll understand what's happening. You have Cephalus is one of the first people you'll read. He is like the old geezer. He's the boomer of the group. He's old. He's a moralistic guy. He's not happy that he's old. He wishes he still had that youthful vigor, but he doesn't. And he's sick about it, right? He's bitter. He's envious. He's kind of in a certain way. He's very business oriented. It's all about money. It's all about business. They had no such thing as capitalism in Athens, but we could kind of see he's a business guy, right? He's very no nonsense. And you see with his definition of justice, you can almost hear, right? Your uncle or your dad at Thanksgiving saying, what justice is, you pay your debts and you tell the truth. Right? It's a classic boomer definition of justice. And this is what Cephalus is. He's an old guy. He's had some success in business, but he's kind of not happy that he wishes he was still young. And his definition is, right, pay your debts and tell the truth. Problem. There's no room for helping. So how can you have a definition of justice, right, that doesn't have some kind of outward focus? Cephalus's understanding of justice is very inward focused. Pay your debts, tell the truth. That's it. That's just neutral. There's no positive justice in this definition. So his son comes in. Polemachus is Cephalus's son, and he says, "Okay, I'll fix what my dad. Get out of here, Dad. Let me do the talking." He says it's doing good to others, right? Okay. Well, they kind of go back and forth a little bit, and he kind of prevaricates, and he goes, okay, wait a minute. Let me refine my definition, give you a second definition. Doing good to friends and harm to enemies. This is what we would call citizenship morality, right? This is what people who are, sports fans have this kind of mentality, right? You have an allegiance to people like you, and you want to hurt, harm, defeat, right, the other team. This is citizen morality. Well, problem here is that the second definition contradicts the first definition. You can't have it. He wants to have it both ways somehow. You can't have it both ways. You can't have the doing good to others, the universal love, right? Love everyone, man. You can't have that and then also somehow do harm to your enemies, right? Okay. Thrasymachus comes in. Thrasymachus is like he's the edgelord of the Republic, and he gets handled too, like a true edgelord would. He's hot-headed. He bursts into the scene. He's heard enough of this prattle about what is justice, this, that, the other. He didn't care. He says, justice, there is no such thing as justice. It's the advantage of the stronger. People with power keep it. It's to control the plebes, and that's it. That's what justice is. He's also proven wrong. But to look, his definition is very important because we'll see it again in an interesting way. Thrasymachus is like Marx, right? But from the other side of the spectrum, right? Marx says, like, yeah, justice is the advantage of the stronger in the sense that people who have power keep power to exploit others, and that's what, like, they call it justice. Where Thrasymachus is like, no, that's the whole point. It's not an injustice that people have power and exploit others. That's the whole thing. There's no such thing as justice. It's just who has power, who doesn't. It's the advantage of the stronger. So kind of in the sense, it's that there is no such thing as justice, right? So these are the definitions from Cephalus to Polemachus to Thrasymachus. And at every turn, right, the dialogue gets them off base, and Plato throws them off, or Socrates, right? We'll talk more about who is Socrates, who is Plato, who said what, who wrote what, who didn't write what. But the philosopher, Plato, throws them off, and ultimately we come to a different definition of justice. So this sets you up for the reading. I'll leave you with a meme that the format is maybe old, but we're talking about a book from 380 BCE. So enjoy, and we'll talk more about it once you've read it and I've seen your annotations. Okay.